everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sexy Business Podcast. I'm Lewd Neko, and joining me as always is Spooky Dangerous.
Hello.
And today we are going to be returning to the world of Futadom World. But this time we're actually going to be talking more in depth about some of the storylines that we played on our own this week.
Yeah, so if you're unfamiliar with our history with this game on the channel, we actually did an interview with one of the creators pretty early on in a previous episode. So definitely recommend that you go and check that out. But for this time around, we did a little bit of a refresher, went back and played the game a little bit. We want to talk about some of the different characters and some of the different routes that we played through. Did you want to kick us off? Did you have a favorite amongst the ones that you played?
Sure. I guess I'll start by talking about Sunni's route. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing her name correctly. That's how I'll just be calling her the whole time. She was one of the characters I was interested by when I first tried out the game a little bit, like a year or so ago. She's probably the nicest character I would say in the game. For those of you completely unfamiliar, most of the Fuda in Futadom world are not exactly kind to the male that you play as. But Sunni is a bit of an exception because she sort of implies or talks a little bit about how she has some beliefs, at least, that males should be seen as equal, or at least shouldn't be treated as horribly. She also has some pretty, I would say, cute romantic scenes that I ended up really enjoying. There's like a really sweet sort of boat ride where, you take her out into the lake and you get to talk, and then you get to fuck her in the butt. Which I think is another thing that's significant about her route is that you actually get to fuck her as opposed to like getting fucked by her, at least initially. Another thing her route explores is you find out later on that she does have a female partner who is sort of a doctor, let's just say, for what is it, the MREA. She does some experiments and tests on males, which makes you a little bit nervous. But I did find that part of the route interesting that there was almost a sort of polyamorous bent on it, where, are you going to get along with your girlfriend's girlfriend?
Yeah, this route is a little bit similar to Claudia's route, because you Claudia and Demetria are together in secret. I think this is more Demetria's route when Claudia's involved, and then you're kind of there, and they're like, "Do you want to be involved or not?" Which is kind of interesting, and especially because Demetria has this religious arc thing to it where it's like, I because I'm part of the church, I'm only allowed to do these specific things. How you're allowed to be involved with them is like really interesting and different. Claudia's like the secret girlfriend, but Demetria not being a top is like this big secret or whatever.
Mm.
And then allowing you to be there and participate in that is really interesting. So the way that they introduce the universe, right, where they kind of open it up, where they're like, men don't have any rights; they're kept in as pets in cages if they're unbound, like the main character, where he has to prove that he's able to be self-sufficient and stand on his own. Otherwise, he will end up being taken, basically. Um, so you're then kind of stuck following around to pick which person you're going to end up being with, right? Whereas Sunni is the most forgiving, I think, because she's much nicer. But if you follow along something like Claudia's route, where you're just at the police station all of the time, a lot of the police do not treat you very nicely.
Yeah, I think Sunni is one of very few characters who is like kind of consent focused, where she actually asks you if you want things. Like, do you want to be bound to me? Not just at this point you should be bound to me. Though I will say I think I don't know how much the Demetria and Claudia route like gets in depth into their relationship. Her girlfriend gets introduced pretty late into her route, so you kind of get to like meet her, and then you have a threesome, and then that route ends, which was like really my
Okay.
only problem. Is that like I wanted to know more about sort of what it would be like to have a partner like that, especially because I will admit I'm somebody with a medvet kink. So part of me was like, I want her girlfriend to do weird, fucked up stuff to us. There's like a part where she asks you, like, "Are you okay with me taking a sample of your blood?" And that's actually like I think part of what determines whether or not she allows you to become bound to Sunni. Basically, you have a threesome at the end, and you tell Sunni like I want to be bound, but if you haven't pleased her girlfriend, she'll just like steal her cum and be like, nope, nope, you don't get to swallow it, you don't get to be bound to her. But if you have sort of appeased her, so to speak, then she lets it happen. So I guess like it's overall a pretty nice route. I enjoyed getting to know Sunni. The scenes with her were great, very hot, fun animations. You get a Fuda male female threesome, which was, beautiful, 10 out of 10. um, but the only thing I guess I wanted was to see a little bit more of sort of her girlfriend and how that dynamic would have actually worked.
Mm, yeah. It is kind of cool seeing how they tell you the story of how all of the different societal differences, I guess, um, run parallel to how the different characters are going to interact with you. Uh, so I played a couple of different rounds. I also did a bunch with them. They have a lot of random standalone scenes now in like a VR
Mm-hmm.
booth, or if you go to the sauna or the spa or something, there's like a couple of random standalone scenes and stuff in there as well. Um, but the main routes that I played was Claudia one, which is like all the police stuff, Demetria, and then Mallory. And Demetria and Mallory are both part of the church, and learning about the church and what the church is telling all of the footed characters and how they're supposed to be interacting with males such as yourself is really interesting. And then for you to be in those places, you have to be like hyper submissive. You have to be basically going along with whatever they say. And in Demetria's version of that, it's kind of like she has a soft spot for you and she's willing to be a bit nicer to you because you find out really that she's a bit more forgiving. But in and also worth noting, Demetria is like the current leader of the church, whereas in Mallory's route, she's like I don't know, middling tier, but she throws a coup, um,
Let's go.
feeling that Demetria is not strong enough leader, and if you follow through with Mallory's route, then she'll succeed in the coup and become the new leader, and change the church to be much more aggressive and dominant with the way that it treats males. So like the whole time you have to be volunteering to suffer and go through all these things, to encourage that, to say yes, this is okay to happen, yes, this is how things are going to change, which I thought was really interesting. Which is cool to see the two different routes is not like two different options for Demetria's route. Like it's just if you pick Demetria, this is the way that things go. If you pick Mallory, this is the way that things change. Um, and then how Demetria and Claudia's route overlaps, where Claudia's route itself is really different and is all police focused, and you're um, solving the case kind of a thing. But then, because I played Claudia first and then Demetria after, so you're like, oh, cool, I want to go and see what Demetria's about. And then Claudia just shows up. It's like, yeah, I'm the girlfriend. And you're like, I'm in trouble, I think.
No, yeah, I've experienced a little bit of the religious routes. I played a little bit of Mallory, and I know some stuff about Demetria. And I did always find it really interesting, the kind of lore that Futadom World chooses to give. There's lots of sort of dystopia type games that get released, where either it's, oh, like all women are slaves again, or all men are slaves, or, monsters rule the world now, like all sorts of stuff like that, but not all of them always get really too deep into the implications. Some of them may like vaguely or loosely imply it, but Futadom World has some bits that do like fully explore, like, what would sort of the economy look like? What
Hmm.
would the religion change and what would it be like in this world? Even in Sunni's route, if you get like her best ending, so you find out early on she is a skater, an ice skater, and she ends up actually winning the Olympics. And this is like a really big deal. It's like, oh, it's the first time that like the Fuda have competed, and it's seen as like sort of this, high reward for her to be able to represent the country and to beat out this like these lowly normal non-Fuda country like males. And I do also like that it like sort of implies or that there are still other countries outside of this Fuda dominated society. So I thought that part was like interesting. It's a little bit more realistic than like, oh, Fuda show up and they just instantly take over the world.
Yeah, they do have like a really cool intro sequence where it's like, this is the nation state. This is how the government and the church kind of operate. This is how males are treated, and then this is the circumstances that you the main character now suffer from, right? And it kind of says like, if you have the bad end, you will end up here, in the male rights activists camp or whatever it is, which is pretty easy to happen to you. And also, I think we should clarify that we both played it on the easiest mode, because we just want story and to jerk our shit rather than trying to actually engage with the stat game mechanics, because it can be a bit hard. Some of the characters are gated by stats. It felt like more heavily like I did Sally's route, and it felt like you had to really hit the gym pretty hard for it to come together. But knowing that you have that not downside but like consequence if you aren't efficient in finding the partner or whatever that you're going to try and get bound to is really interesting. It doesn't necessarily add like a time pressure to what you're doing, but it's like it feels like you have a failure state, which I thought was kind of interesting. One of the other The game has a couple of built-in failure states, and one of the other ones is your landlord, where if, and you're playing in the normal version, you don't have enough rent to pay the landlord whenever they show up, you can offer to be bound to the landlord instead, and then the landlord takes you up into her apartment, and then you become human furniture. Which is kind of a funny ending, because it's not a fully developed route. It's just like a scene, I guess, and you're like, well, this is the bad end for me, I suppose. And so there's a couple of things like that, and there's a couple of in-game events like Goddess Day, where you can just get like randomly jilted off your route onto another different person's route if you encounter them, which is also kind of cool. So it does feel like it gets pretty close to feeling like a living, breathing world where each of these different characters are on and about doing their own thing. You can go and explore a specific person if you're interested in romancing them. Otherwise, you can go and kind of wander around and talk to different people and do different things.
Yeah, I guess talking about bad ends, I didn't mention this even though it's really important to Sunni's route, but there's another character who's tied to her route, named Shauna, who is the stereotypical yandere character in this game. Now, I'm a huge fan of yanderes. I love yandere dating sims and murder sims and fucked up weird porn. So I was really excited that she had not exactly a whole route, I would say. It's more like she has an ending that you can get forced onto if you fuck up a part in Suni's story. But what I really enjoyed about her as a yandere, this is going to sound weird, but I liked that she was really gross. One of my problems with female yanderes, and this is kind of like what we were talking about with like monster girls versus monster boys, is that oftentimes female yanderes are a little bit too orderly for me. Like they're too well put together. Like they're crazy, but it's like Harley Quinn crazy. We're like, oh, she's still sexy and attractive and cute, and you want her. She's just a little off kilter. But no, like Shauna is like straight up gross and weird and horrible. Like I could best compare her to Tomoko from the one Wadamote, where it's like, she doesn't take care of herself. She is implied to like murder animals for fun. She basically goes back to your apartment, she's already got like sex toys and cosplay littered everywhere. And then when she fucks you, she's like, oh, I'll be gentle, and then she's totally not. um, and at the very end, she like comes onto a cake and it smashes your face in it. Like it's so horrible. And I loved it. I was like, oh, this is great. Like I love when a yandere route is actually like fucked and you're like, oh, this would be terrible. My only problem with her route is that it pretty much ends after that point. It ends with you just being permanently her little torture pet. And I
Hmm.
almost wish that there was like a longer sort of like Stockholmy like aspect to her route, like slowly getting broken over time, rather than it being like one scene and then it goes straight to like her ending. But she was an interesting character. So that happens is basically she attacks Sunni. They can both be found in the park. So I guess the presumption is Shauna saw you in the park, fell in love with you, and then she sees you with Sunni and tries to kill her. And you get her ending if you're a weak and scrawny male and you don't actually do anything to save Sunni. But there's two ways you can sort of deal with Shauna. So if you have really high intelligence, you can talk her out of it by sort of like doing a little like mind game with her to wait until the police come. Or if you have a decent amount of strength, you can just kick her off the building. You're on a rooftop essentially, and yeah, she fucking dies. And what I found really interesting about that was the choice I ended up keeping in my route with Sunni, is that it messes with Sunni quite a bit. She talks a lot about it. Like I can't stop thinking about seeing her falling off the building. Like even though Sunni was the victim in this scenario, like still feeling that sort of like secondhand guilt about seeing somebody die and how, that sort of almost trauma bonds you two together. And she talks about how like, oh, it's a little fucked up and, I try not to think about it, but let's talk about it. But I thought that was like a very grounded part of their route where it's not like you kill Shada and then we just forget about it, but it's something that does come back throughout her route as she talks about like still being kind of traumatized from it.
There is definitely something to be said about the writing for this game. Because in like a lot of the religious routes and stuff, the writing has to do two things. The first one is convince you that this is how these people live, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're a member of the church as a Fuda, then like this is the kind of prayer that they're doing, or this is how they have to live, or whatever, and this is the perks that they get for being a leader or whatever. But then also like they have to now additionally convince you that that person as an individual has goals and whims that either align or do not align with those circumstances and all this kind of stuff, right? And I think this game does a really good job of that, where you can get a feeling for the person outside of the setting, but you can get a feeling of how the setting influences the person and vice versa. Um, in some of the more uh, heavier is maybe not the right word, but in some of the routes where it's like really more about what's happening in the world, because Claudia's route is a bit like that. Um, where you're going through the bust, but you're also being hypnotized by the chief to shoot and kill your friends. Um, Not specifying who, in case it's spoilers that people really care about. Um, but like you're having something happen to you that in the real world where we live would be horrible, and you're being conditioned to do these things. We literally have several movies about why this is terrible. Um, but in this place, they're like, look, this is very normal and actually happens to males all the time. It is our right as superior Fuda to treat males in this way, and part of the male reconditioning is this and all this kind of stuff. And then you kind of go through it, and it is really weird. And then when the actual scene happens, when you have to shoot this person, you control the mouse and the crosshair as to where it's going to go. But no
Oh
matter
no.
where you move it, it will always snap back to them. Like you can't actually stop it. So you just get to struggle for a little bit and stuff. So like the way that they communicate to you how the world has affected you as a character as well is really cool in that way.
No, that sounds really cool. Something that I ended up thinking about while I was playing this time was like thinking about particularly like my gendered experience playing it. So one of the routes I played was a character named Vicky, who I would best describe as like a sort of benevolent sexist, where she's still very much a misandrist, but she's misandrist in like a gentlewomanly way, where she's like, I don't think we should be doing non-consensual things to these males, but I do think it's important that they get married and partnered up with a Fuda as soon as possible. And I do believe they're still inferior, and that's why we have to like protect them and stuff like that. So it's the equivalent of a guy being like, oh well, women should be married before they start having sex, and they should be the homeowner and or not the homeowner, like the homemaker, and men should take care of them and stuff like that, which is like benevolent because it's like rooted in like wanting to protect, but it's still rooted in the idea of like, and that's because we're an equal, they're not equal to us. So I was really kind of fascinated with her route because it features like a lot of moments of like very subtle sexism based on like the way she talks to you, or like how she feels entitled to you because she initially saves you from basically getting assaulted by Rye. And I was thinking a lot about like having personal experiences dealing with people like this, and I don't know, it made me wonder. And granted, I think most people who play this game are just jerking their shit and then moving on. But maybe there's a small, percentage of people who play these stories and, develop more of a sense of empathy of like, oh wow, it sucks to be treated like this. Maybe I should like think about like how I treat other people or how my friends treat other people, and stuff like that. Because there are some parts of it that are very like rooted in sort of real world discrimination or things that happen to people.
It would be really funny to have your third eye opened because you were playing an insanely crass dick girl dating sim. But in a way, it's like you're kind of right. Like it's intentionally portrayed in such a way that these people are oppressed, and so that you're experiencing both what that oppression is like on many different scales. Like there's a lot of characters that do kind of microaggressions. There'll be times they're like, "Oh, sorry, I've totally forgot that you're a male and you wouldn't understand," or stuff like that. To like the grand scale things, or if you do actually get arrested and sent to the camp, so that's like the bad end where you're basically in a sex cube for the rest of your life, with a roommate in the cube, or turned into human furniture, or you know, um, turned into a tribute at this big religious ceremony or whatever, and understanding how you're you are as a player forced to say yes to tolerate these things in order to progress, right? Which is the same thing that happens to people in the real world when they are suffering from these things. They're being abused, they're being hassled, whatever. You still have to continue. It doesn't just go away. You have to trudge forwards through it in order to see the content, which is life. It's a funny parallel to make. And in this, they're like, oh, this person's treating you badly, or you don't like them. You are able to go and look at other routes, but like you're still trapped in the world. Like the oppression of you as a character doesn't go away, which is kind of cool. And I know for some people, probably that's part of the draw. Like they want to feel like that. The head empty, no thoughts. I just want mommy to take care of me kind of aspect of it, like is really there. But there is also that social commentary of yes, what if you were completely subjugated? What if you are unfairly monitored by the police even though you hadn't done anything? What if your landlord was making overt advances at you and suggesting that you could do something else to pay the rent? A lot of these things where we live and breathe would definitely be super illegal and potentially get the offenders arrested, right? And you'd have a pretty easy day in court getting past a lot of these things. So it is really easy to see how much of a juxtaposition it is and how much the main character has to suffer, but also be like, yes, and this is the person that I like enough to suffer from it with them. And like Raya's route is like incredibly abusive, I would say, compared to a lot of the other ones. She's like the most aggressive. And so being like, yes, I'm continuing to choose to come back here, right, is also very interesting from a storytelling perspective in that way, because it's like, she's really hot. I'm going to continue to get treated like shit because I want to be with this person. And all of a sudden, maybe you'll have a realization about what real world relationships are like, where it's like, oh no, I can fix him. He's totally fine. There's nothing wrong. Which is not the
Yeah.
greatest.
Yeah, Vicky's a little bit similar to Rye in that she's got like abusive alcoholic tendencies. She's very much she is an alcoholic. Like half the scenes you have with her are just you drink with Vicky, you drink a lot with Vicky. And she does have two endings, so she has a good ending and a bad ending. I guess I won't say how they get triggered, but basically in one of the endings, she just straight up becomes your abuser. It's not cute. Like you are completely mind broken, and she like regularly seems to like beat and assault you. And then the other ending, like things are kind of fine. Which on one hand, I did think it was interesting to have a character go down such like a dark sort of like route in like a very real way. My only problem, and again, maybe I'm just expecting too much from a dick girl fucking game, but I was like the this particular trigger for the difference between her being a loving, wholesome, helpful partner and being a like shitbag alcoholic abuser is something that wouldn't realistically cause that big of a change, just because it's really hard to rewire somebody who has those kinds of tendencies. But again, that's just me being like, I want realism in my food and wine game.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. I A lot of it is very fantastical, and a lot of it is very much setting up this interesting setting. But like some of the characters feel really grounded. Mallory's route's really funny to me because Mallory as a character, when she's interacting with you alone, seems like the most sensible person out of everyone. And like the way that she convinces you to go along with her is that she's very sensible and she's trying to fix things, make things better, and improve everything. And then when you see her interacting with other members of the church, you're like, wow, actually, she's more like a conservative trying to return things away from the progress that they've had and subjugate people more and like return to like a religious dominated thing and all this kind of stuff. And, like even within
Mm.
the church. And it's like, okay, wow, actually, maybe this goes bigger than I thought. And so it's kind of interesting to unravel what who she actually is because like that realization that maybe she's not who she is to you, to everyone, or whatever, is kind of interesting as well. I think just following the church route in general is probably my favorite part of the game. Even though I have played a bunch of the different routes, I feel like Mallory best girl, but the way that you see how all the church works and all the different people work in it and how it all comes together is really interesting. And being able to kind of wander along that, and eventually you get bound to either Demetria or getting bound to Mallory in the end, still gives you kind of a place like at their side as they are a leader, um, which doesn't really have many benefits for you. One of the happy endings is you're like it's kind of like a concubine type life where you just are in this really nice um, holiday destination looking kind of big bed, a nice view type thing. Where you get to be like, cool, this is it. You have a nice life now as this pet for this person. Which is, I guess, as nice an outcome as this game can offer you compared to some of the other options. Um, but yeah, that is, I think Futadom World is definitely one of the best games in the genre, and it is a very big game. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of people in the team that bring this together, and all the different stories and how it all comes together. And considering all that, I still think it works really cohesively as a whole. They really deliver well on the setting. A lot of the characters are very interesting, and feel very different. Like you get a fun, different experience with different ones. Whereas a lot of other games like this, like, oh, I'm going to follow the feat character so I can get the feat content. This is more like you're getting a specific story about who they are as a person or their character or how they interact with the world and the circumstances.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if I had to describe Futadom World to someone, I would describe it more as I use the term dating sim in quotation marks. I mean, they call it a binding sim, but it's a dating sim with a lot of sex in it. I wouldn't describe this as to somebody as like a game that's going to be nonstop sex. Because I think one of the complaints this game gets sometimes is like, oh, it's too wordy and there's too much plot. Which I think if you're that kind of person, either turn on the skip function and just hold down the control button, or this is just probably not a game for you if you want a game that is devoid of plot and is just fucking and that's it.
Yeah, because I feel like the reward for it is following along a particular person's route and then being rewarded with some of the content. That said, there is a lot of random side content like the vignettes, like the VR room,
Mm-hmm.
like the spa and the gym and stuff like that, where you can just go and get to a scene. Like if something feels like it's running kind of long, you hit a break, you go and do one of the side contents, get an impactful fuck scene, blow your load, and then come back to the game later. It's not that ridiculous as far as a gameplay loop goes. But that is the end of another Sexy Business podcast episode. We do like to keep things a little bit short and sweet. Because if we go through and talk about everything that Futadom world has to offer, which there is a lot, we're not going to leave anything for you to explore. The point is to give you kind of an idea, see if this is maybe something that you want to try out, hear what we enjoyed, what we thought was really good. Maybe you didn't play one of the routes that we played, and now that you've learned a little bit more about it, you might be interested to come and check it out. But I am definitively wanting to know in the comments, please tell us who is the best girl. I currently am a Mallory believer, but I want to know what you think who your best girl is. And after our Patreon, we did a poll on what games we wanted to be seen playing on the show. Futadom World was number one, voted by a ridiculous landslide. But there is still another couple of games in second, third, fourth place that we might be considering for future episodes. So if you are interested in having some say in what kind of content we are going to be looking at for this show, definitely check out the Patreon, follow us on Twitter, all of that kind of stuff, so that you can potentially recommend something for us to check out. Because the whole point is that we are looking at games and creators from the NSFW space so that we can talk about it and we can shed a little light on some underloved projects. But once again, hit the like and subscribe buttons. This has been the Sexy Business Podcast, and hopefully we'll see you next week.